Hello, hello. We'll give a couple more minutes for any others to find their way in. Good opportunity. Can everybody hear me okay? If you can hear me fine, please put something in the chat showing that you can hear me. That'll help my sanity. Perfect. Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Zach. Perfect. Perfect. All right. Welcome to Cybersecurity Essentials Protect Your Life and Business. I am your host, Ian Harris, and this is brought to you by Harris Family Computer Services. So, Cybersecurity Essentials, my intention in using the word essential is not necessarily to give the idea that it's basic, but definitely to give the impression that it's foundational. A lot of webinars that I've seen, and it's almost becoming kind of a fad to where there's kind of a boilerplate, for lack of a better word, that you're getting, and it's not like there's not information of value. But I thought, hey, why don't I do a webinar based solely on my experience? I write the whole thing, and then hopefully some unique things of value can be transferred on to everybody. All right. Okie dokie. So today's agenda, going to introduce myself, introduce our company, some common attacks you are at risk for, following up with some cybersecurity best practices, and a Q&A at the end, wrapping up completely with how to keep in touch. So one thing I want to mention before we continue is that we're using Teams. And so we do have there's a Q&A section right next to the chat. So if at any point you have a question, just shoot it in the questions and answer section. And then at the end, I will answer it to the best of my ability. If not, totally fine. All right. Okay, so who am I and why do I have any right to give a webinar on cybersecurity? So, like I mentioned before, my name is Ian Harris, and I'm the owner of Harris Family Computer Services. I grew up in IT, and I started the family business in December of 2019. I worked a long time as an IT contractor and also an IT employee in corporate positions. I created Harris Family Computer Services because I was getting a ton of feedback from family, friends, and especially business owners that were expressing almost identical issues with IT support. Because IT can be a lucrative field, it does tend to attract investors who simply get into the business because of its profit potential. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but what the consistent consequence consequences I have noticed are slow IT support, technicians who aren't properly trained, and then once the business gets big enough, they will sell it, and that inevitably leads to offshoring the IT support, and any hope of customer experience, of good customer experience, that is basically destroyed. And so the whole essence of of Harris Family Computer Services, the goals of the business are to be the example of what an IT service company should be, from the best customer service to genuine IT solutions, not just some IT guy who's Googling, the fix to a problem, and also deliver to the clients fast. And we put our family name on the business because we stake our reputation on the services. It's my desire to pass the business down to our children if they will have it. Um, and we have no exit plan. And this is not an advertisement for my company, but this is just kind of an introduction to who we are and what we're doing. So let's get into it. Over the next 30 minutes, we're going to touch on some cybersecurity attacks, some best practices, how to implement those best practices, and how we can keep in touch going forward. So, common attacks you're at risk for. So, we just have three here: phishing attacks, data breaches, and SIM swapping. And so a lot of this you're probably going to be familiar with a little bit, but I'm hoping to give some new insights on some things from my perspective. All right, so phishing attacks, what is it? I want to introduce you to a term that you may or may not be familiar with: social engineering. CompTIA defines social engineering as a method of gaining the trust of a user so that the attacker can acquire sensitive information that can be used to access data. Therefore, phishing, which is a homophone of phishing, is when attackers try to get your sensitive information by pretending to be somebody that you trust. So, a couple common approaches that phishing will take are deceptive emails, fake websites, that is to say, they're real websites but have a deceptive nature, and fraudulent phone calls. We're going to highlight emails because studies are showing that something like 90% of malware, um, as well as phishing, are done through email. So the attack surface for email is wide, and so that's something that we want to focus on. So the example here, we have an example of a phishing email. There's 1, 2, 2, and 3. So these are some things that you're going to notice about a phishing email. Number one, the sender is pretending to be Wells Fargo. They have an email that says Wells Online Bank 2, but the domain is Comcast.net. It may as well be Gmail. This is because anybody could do this. You could create a Gmail, for example, with pretending to be a bank that has somewhat similar spelling to the name of that bank, and then just use gmail.com. And a lot of people don't notice because they're looking at the username when they should be looking at the domain. So the second part here that you can notice is grammar. This is highlighted in the 2 and 2 section. So in the subject of the email, they have alerts with an exclamation mark in the front and an exclamation mark in the back. For one, this is like a totally generic word, alerts. It doesn't give the impression of coming from an authority or where you think they're coming from. And two, it also highlights that a lot of people sending phishing emails are not native English speakers. So you can really get a sense of the grammar when you're analyzing these emails. For example, if you go down to the body of the email, the second number 2 highlight, you're going to see, "We are sorry, comma, for your protection and security reasons, your Wells Fargo account has been locked." First off, this is extremely generic, and your bank is not going to be sending you an email with details about what's happened with your account. They're going to call you and they're going to try to get in touch with you directly before they share any of the information. On top of that, after the comma, it goes back to capital F. And this is a subtle thing to notice, but it's extremely critical because these little details, although anybody could make grammar errors, it's highly unlikely that a reputable business is going to be sending emails out before proofreading them. Now, the third point, this one is more insidious. So if you look at the link, it's got everything you think it should have: HTTPS, www dot, and then it also wellsfargo.com. So this one's a little trickier. And what they're doing is they're pasting a link when they're sending an email, and then they're changing the alt text over that link to something more recognizable, or something from who they are trying to pretend to be. In this case, so there's going to be a link under it, and then what you're reading is actually just layered text, an overlay of text over the link. Okay, so what do we do? How do we prevent phishing attacks? I want you to inculcate into your brain to be on the watch. Analyze these emails that are coming in as much detail as you possibly can. So we want to verify the identity of every person and organization that we communicate with, whether it be over the phone, through email, or even through direct mail. If possible, verify their identity, their email, website URL, by analyzing the spelling. And this is if you, out of everything you take when it comes to phishing, if you can get into your head to analyze the grammar and the spelling of emails that you're potentially responding to, that's what I want you to remember. And never click on suspicious links if you're not 100% certain. If you need help with that, contact your IT service provider, or at least your IT guy, to help confirm the identity of the sender. Okay, data breach. Data breaches. What is it? A data breach is an incident where sensitive or confidential information is accessed, stolen, or used by an unauthorized individual or group. This kind of attack is extremely common, and I would even venture to say that I can almost guarantee that you and I have been affected by these types of attacks a data breach. Some examples of the types of data breaches are malicious external breaches. This is when a database is hacked or affected by malware. An accidental internal breach. This is when data is leaked by human error or a misconfigured system, which happens, and even malicious insider threats. And this is when a legitimate employee is also a hacker, or even an employee is disgruntled and so they look out, they seek information on how to leak data or do something else malicious. Now, there is a resource for checking if your accounts have been listed in a data breach. Ideally, whoever the company or organization is that has had their data breached, they should be reaching out to you. U-Haul, funny enough, when I was preparing this webinar, U-Haul sent me a direct mail in the mailbox about a data breach that I was affected by. And so, what you could do to proactively check on this is this website, haveibeenpwned.com. It's a very silly name, but it's a really good resource. You go to the website, you put in your email address, and it's going to tell you if you're on a known data breach. I've done this for myself over the years, and I have been um, like constantly data is getting breached. So, how would we prevent this kind of attack? So, in theory, you should be using long, unique, and complicated passwords for every system that you have an account with. For example, your bank, email, and social media, definitely. But in reality, which is something that everybody can relate to, we often pick passwords that are simple, easy to remember, and pretty much the same for each system that we use. So I have a twofold recommendation if you're in that position. Number one, use a credential management platform such as Bitwarden or KeePass. Also, they're also known as password managers. Second, use an app authenticator such as Microsoft Authenticator or Aegis or Google Authenticator, whatever you think works best for you. And so the reason why I recommend this is because if you use a password manager, it allows you to easily generate passwords that are unique to every single system that you're using. And what you would do instead is you'd have one master password. And if you couldn't remember it by repetition, you could even write this down, have it physically on you, and ideally in a safe when you don't directly need it, and then use that password to access your other passwords. And also in that way, you don't even need to know your other passwords because you can just reference your password manager. Now, this is really good because if you're using unique passwords for every system that you're logging into, if you're part of a data breach, then they're going to basically, it's going to base your information is going to be useless to them because they're not going to be able to use that password for another system. On top of that, if you're using an app authenticator, and we're going to get into why we should be using an app authenticator instead of SMS codes in a second, but if you're using that app authenticator, it basically it puts you it puts you as a target way out of the range that they're willing to spend the time to attack. And that's really a big part of cybersecurity is putting yourself at distance from as a target, because especially with quantum computing becoming more common or starting to become a thing, you're going to see that nobody is really wholly safe. Nobody's 100% safe. And but the best approach, or the best mentality to take is to distance yourself from being a target as much as possible. Okay, SIM swapping. This one is super important. This is actually the attack that started coming up that I came up with the idea of doing a cybersecurity webinar. So this right now is the most important thing that I really want to get people to know about. It's an emerging attack. It's not necessarily new, but it is sweeping right now. So a SIM swapping attack, also known as a SIM intercept attack, is a form of identity theft in which an attacker convinces a cell phone carrier to switch a victim's phone number to a different device. This can enable the hacker to get multi-factor authentication SMS codes when, let's say, resetting your email or bank account password. And so, okay, this is really not good because a lot of cell phone providers, like let's say Verizon, they hire people that are out of the country, and they're very easy to basically bribe. And so if you can somehow, like on LinkedIn, if you're looking for somebody who works for Verizon, you can bribe them with money to switch somebody that is a victim to use number to their SIM card, so that if they get your information like from a data breach, then they can just go to your bank and have the SMS code sent to them. This is crazy and becoming a huge problem. Some examples of like people who've been victims to the attack are Blockchain Capital's Bart Stevens lost $6.3 million in a SIM swapping attack, and then a Florida man, he was actually basically a teenager, was charged in a SIM swapping spree. He was part of the hacker groups Octopus and Scattered Spider. He stole at least $800,000, and probably more because it was obfuscated through crypto. So this is a huge attack. If somebody gets access to your bank account, then you're in trouble. So what can we do to prevent SIM swapping? Okay, so like we mentioned before, we want to use an MFA method that does not rely on SMS. You want to use an app authenticator instead. I personally recommend Microsoft Authenticator. Also, Aegis, Aegis, is a really good app for this as well. You want to move. This doesn't just go for like important things like your bank or social media and so on. You really want to move away from SMS as a whole if you can. If the system that you're using is can facilitate that. There's another unique thing that you can do with your phone provider, and this is going to be different depending on the provider. You might be able to do this yourself. You might need to call them to set this up with them, but you can set up a unique PIN code specifically for when you're moving a number from one SIM to a different SIM. So this is going to be, a PIN that when if somebody were to try to move your number to their SIM card, they're going to need the PIN. And so this is going to bypass them to be able to bribe the the employees, because there's this layer of security that is going to follow them. So this is something I really highly recommend doing. I think it requires everybody's immediate attention. Okay, so let's move into some cybersecurity best practices. Keeping your devices updated. Many are hesitant to update their software because there's a tendency for compatibility issues. I know this problem very well. I'm very sympathetic to it. It happens to me all the time, but we should weigh the risks and costs against the annoyance of the of the potential issue the minor issue that we might have in software compared to keeping good security. It's better to be annoyed than be a victim of a cybersecurity attack. Here's another big one. This is also one that if you forget anything else, please remember this, because it's so simple and easy, but it's very rarely done. If you're This is locking your computer when you're away from your keyboard. On Windows, it's super easy. Hit the Windows key and L. If you're on a Mac, there's a couple more buttons. Hit Command, Control, and Q to lock your screen. Of course, for this to be useful, you have to have a password to get into your computer's account. Okay, using a VPN. There are a lot of misconceptions about VPNs. Here are some things that VPNs don't do. They do not achieve total anonymity. There are advanced ways to get your actual IP address, even if you're using a VPN. It doesn't prevent Google, Facebook, or other companies from collecting your private data. It doesn't provide better security when working from home, necessarily. It doesn't protect your passwords, and it doesn't help you avoid a data breach on services that you use online. But here are some things that VPNs are great at doing. They encrypt your data so your ISP or mobile network provider cannot monitor or log your account activity. They encrypt your DNS requests so your ISP or mobile network provider cannot monitor or log the domains that you visit. They increase your security on untrusted public networks by preventing man-in-the-middle attacks. They mask your IP address from websites and servers you connect to. and they can help you circumvent censorship or geographical blocks on websites and content. Now, when it comes to VPNs, I personally recommend using iVPN. And I'm not associated with them in any way, but I do recommend their service. You can even purchase the VPN without creating an account. It'll generate a very long, unique user ID string that you can use, and it doesn't hold your payment information, but you can use it like to buy VPN services. And what another thing that I like about it is you can buy a block of time. You don't need to commit to like a year or even a month, but you can buy certain ranges of time if you think that you're going to need a VPN within a certain time frame, or or if you're like just want to try it out. Okay, secure your home and business network. At a minimum, you should change the SSID and password. SSID is the name of the Wi-Fi and password of your Wi-Fi network, and update your router's credentials. Routers are sold and shipped with default credentials hackers likely already know. So if somebody gets on your Wi-Fi, very likely most people have not updated the router's username and password, and it's typically admin for the username and admin for the password. They could easily get into your router and wreak all kinds of havoc. Additionally, I recommend installing a firewall at the entrance of your network to protect against malicious data from entering and spreading across your devices. There are routers that do have very good built-in firewalls, so you don't necessarily need to have an external different appliance, although it's generally better and faster speed-wise if you're going to do that. But when it comes to firewalls, you're going to want to look at um, like next generation technology when it comes to firewall. They're going to call that IPS and IDS. That's a little bit more advanced for this kind of foundational webinar. But if you're interested in learning more about that or have any questions, you can always shoot me an email and we can talk about that further. Okay, be cautious when using public Wi-Fi. So avoid accessing sensitive information on public networks or public Wi-Fi networks, whether you're Wi-Fi or tethered in through Ethernet, as they are often unsecured and can leave you vulnerable to attacks. I do recommend using a VPN if you're going to use a public Wi-Fi. If you're at the airport, if you're at Starbucks or whatever working, definitely I recommend using a VPN. Okay, lastly, the last best practice we have is to back up your data. Regularly backing up your data to an external storage device or to the cloud to minimize the impact of an attack. It's best to use a combination of backup locations for a couple reasons. So, if you back up to an external device like a NAS, your data could be lost in the event of a natural disaster because it's physically in your location. So if you're, let's say, if your area is prone to wildfires, then that's a risk that you need to take into consideration. But cloud providers guarantee the uptime of your data, but not its integrity, meaning they take no responsibility for your files get corrupted. A lot of people don't know this. OneDrive, Google Drive, they have something like a 99.9% guarantee of uptime. So this is great because they're guaranteeing that you're going to have access to the files that you have in the cloud. However, they make changes. They have problems with their hardware too, just like everyone else. And if your data gets corrupted, if you're losing files, they take no responsibility. So the best thing is to use both. And additionally, if you're the unfortunate victim of a ransomware attack, you may be able to avoid it altogether by keeping the data you need in a separate location. So, with all these things in mind, I recommend having multiple backups of the files that you want to protect. All right. So, I try to leave a little bit of time at the end for any questions. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in. But otherwise, let's keep in touch. You can visit our website at harrisfcs.com. You can shoot us an email at office@harrisfcs.com. You can give us a call at 541-204-0597. And we had a small group today of people, but first this is just the first webinar. And so any feedback as to how to do it better is definitely greatly appreciated. Like I was saying before, the approach that I took to doing this was all on my own. So I just wrote this on my own. I'm not like taking it like from a script. A lot of IT companies, which is mostly for the most part good, they'll share like, oh, what they're doing. But for me, I kind of like to take my own approach, because when I'm going through the information or I'm writing it down, then I'm usually thinking of things that I wasn't thinking of before. And so it's a good opportunity for me to make sure that I'm very thorough and giving as much, advice or as much value in this as much as possible. Perfect. Yeah. Thank you. Great info. We'll need to look into SIM swapping. Some platforms like the IRS only have the option for SMS verification. Yeah, that is a big issue. I know the crazy thing is even a lot of banks only have the option for SMS verification. This is kind of an example of like where the technology is outpacing a lot of institutions, a lot of organizations. So that's really tough. And so it's like the only other option is to get that unique PIN set up with your cell provider. Um, and phone, I mean, it's really interesting to see how phone numbers have become such a almost like a social security number, like almost embedded into your identity. And that's why SIM swapping attacks are considered that is considered identity theft. So yeah, horrible stuff that's going on. Um, but I'm very much in this world where I'm constantly researching, these kind of things and keeping up to date with them. And something too that just came to my mind is like when you get to a size in your company that's bigger, making changes and moving it becomes increasingly difficult. Those change management procedures are there's a lot of weight involved in moving a lot of people and training people, and so that's why a lot of things with bigger companies can get left behind. See, Phil says, former IT guy, tech trainer here. Thanks for the updated info. Absolutely. Good idea. Don't take terms for granted with non IT people, though. Some don't know AFK, etc. Thanks again. Yeah, definitely. I really appreciate that. Yeah, AFK, away from keyboard. Definitely. Yeah, very good point. The best thing for these obviously like you getting some updated information, but also people who are it's completely foreign to. It's really good to kind of elevate everybody's awareness of what's going on. So I definitely appreciate the advice. Thank you very much. Awesome. All right. Well, looks like we can wrap up here a few minutes early. So I want to thank you guys for kind of being the pioneers for these webinars. This is a new thing, and I'm looking forward to doing more. And so, yeah, you can check out our social media stuff too: Facebook, yeah, we have an Instagram for the business too, LinkedIn. I'm going to be keeping those things posted with any future webinars or different kind of like events like that too. So, all right, thank you guys. I'll let you go. Have a great rest of your day.